Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach and author of Food Truck 101, Beginner to Winner. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business. All this week, I am talking franchising with Thayne Martin. Today, we dive into the mountain of cash you're going to need for that awesome franchising idea that you have.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
In my opinion, I think it would take at least $500,000 to do it right. To do a national franchise, you're looking at least $500,000. We would spend probably, I think our budget was, marketing the franchises, because we would use brokers, but then we would do our own, right? So we might take an ad out in a local newspaper where we had been proven that it was okay for registration, so you've got that budget that you've got to spend, right? And if you're going to do national advertising in some of the franchise trade mags, you're looking at $2,000 to $3,000, each issue. So you can burn through $100,000 in marketing dollars really quickly in the franchise business, right? And then you have to get into there's a lot of franchise trade shows, right? And they usually have them in various, not every month, but there's usually some going on around the country. There'll be an East Coast one, a West Coast one, Central, right? And you got to be at every one of those. So now you're going to need a booth, right? You're going to have a booth that you can have. You're going to have to fly in. You're going to have to bring your staff. You're going to have, samples of your food. You're going to have all of that stuff. And then you got to be able to hand somebody at that show, an offering circular. And you got to be really careful about that, because if you hand your offering circular to somebody who lives in a state you're not registered in, they can trick you and fine you just for that, right? That's what people don't realize is it is like the SEC, right? That's what it feels like. I was shocked at how regulated that side of the business is, and someday with my business, I think I can turn it into a franchise because I've got something unique. Okay. But I do know that I can't franchise it as a food truck. It's going to have to go into stick built. I'm going to need at least 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 operating units that I can take an average across a financial statement and say, okay, here's my credibility, right? Because you can't sell it without credibility, right? And that's a mistake that a lot of franchisors do. They get one little business, they think they're going to be successful, and everyone is going to work like this. But you and I both know that you can take the same business, put it in a different location, and have different results, right? That's why you got to have, it's kind of like a big enough pool of franchise locations so that you have that credibility, right? And that's what you're looking at. And then you also got to think about, what am I giving up in control, right? So as a franchisor, and I have somebody that comes to me as a franchisee, and I'll give you examples. We had some franchisees that I wish we would have never have taken their money. And you know why? Because they really weren't skilled in the business, right? They really didn't understand. They didn't necessarily have the skills. And so one bad franchisee can also create a big headache for you as you try and go market, because they'll pick up the phone. And now, of course, on the internet, they'll find one of your franchisees. They'll pick up the phone and call them, right? So it can be, you got to be very careful. It's like picking a business partner in many ways. And so there's that side of the business that you have to think about, right? Because especially when you're franchising, you want the money and you want the revenue. And when you're first starting out, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is selling your franchise to people that aren't prepared, right? And then it backfires on you. And then you're really screwed, because now you have zero credibility in the market, right? So those are some of the things that you really got to think about as you do this business. And then the brokers, they're going to charge you a percentage. They get paid a commission for selling the franchise. Typically, it's a percentage of what you are of the franchise fee. It is a good way to sell. You just have to really have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, because they can get you in trouble. If they hold something out that you're not licensed to technically do, then they can get you in trouble. So that's where you really got to be careful, because the fines are, not in the hundreds, they're in the tens of thousands, right? And that's where I see most people that just think, oh, I got this great business, I'm going to franchise it. No, not that easy. Not that easy.
You're exactly right. When just some of the things that you've been talking about, I've experienced.
for example, Quiznos was super easy to become a franchisee, and they did a lot of the things that you talk about. They would actually go to cities and rent a hotel conference room and invite a
Yep.
bunch of people in, and basically they would throw a dart at the city map and say, that's where my location is going to be. As long as you had decent enough credit, they were giving you a franchise, and those folks had no clue how to run a restaurant. And then they got locked into the exact thing you talked about on, Quiznos would brand certain products. You have to buy this particular product. And it would make us so angry because we could go to Sam's Club and get the exact same product, same brand for dollars, on the taste cheaper than Quiznos was selling it to us. Just drove people crazy. They ended up being sued several times by groups of franchisees because they couldn't make the kind of money that was implied in the franchise disclosure.
That exact. I had a friend that had a Quiznos franchise, and he had it in downtown Tucson, and he had a good location. And for his first year, he made money, and he was happy. And then Quiznos sold another location not too far from where he was at on a better street, and it basically bypassed my friend coming off the exit off the freeway. So suddenly his sales dropped like 40% when that new franchisee opened, to the point where he was just swapping dollars. He wasn't making any money, right? And ultimately he had to close the business and he went bankrupt, right? And that was, quote, a national franchise, right? So, you see, other companies that are infamous for over franchising. Subway's another one. You've got a Subway in every corner. You know what I mean? And they don't really care if they put you out of business, because they just picked up another franchise fee and they're going to get the royalty regardless, right? So there's not a lot of loyalty, to the franchisees. In my opinion, the right business model is the one where you don't set up the gouging, right? All you're going to do is set up the sourcing for your products and your services, and you've got standards that these franchisees have to meet, right? You're better off setting standards and recommended suppliers than you are to be the source. You know what I mean? Because just like you said, franchisees get upset. They feel like you got them hostage because they can go to Costco and they can buy that same meat coming from the same plant, but because you're selling it to them wholesale and you're part of the system and part of the franchise agreement is you have to buy all of your product from me. Right. So if it's overpriced and you sign those documents, you're stuck. You can't go outside of that, because if you do, they can just yank your franchise.
Yep.
Right. So those are the things that, you run into. But it's funny that you mentioned Quiznos, because look what happened to Quiznos.
Yeah.
They're gone. Like I don't even, they're gone, right? I don't even know if they're in business at all. And yet at one time they had what? They may have had 5, 6, 7, 800 franchises. So what does that tell you? Even if you franchise the business, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful long term, right?
They actually have more stores than that, because they assign franchise numbers to each store, and the ones that we had were in the thousands. So they had several.
Okay, so
they had a bunch.
Yeah. I'll bet you what happened. I'll bet you if we researched, I'll bet you somebody picked up the rights to Quiznos, and you can still buy a Quiznos franchise. And it's probably a competitor that picked it up for pennies on the dollar. And now it's, hold your enemies close, right? And that's what they do. They just go buy a failing franchisor, bring it in, and then eventually they put that out of business, and then you grow your market share with your franchise, right? That's probably what happened to Quiznos.
I'm sure it did. Going along those same lines, the very first company that I worked for, where I was on the franchisor side, we started as a little teeny tiny company. When I started, we had 35 stores, and we grew to about 120. When they hit 120 is when they started getting serious about, let's get some franchises. And they did all the things you've been talking about. And this was way before they had brokers and that kind of thing. And the company just grew leaps and bounds. But a lot of the people that came into the system weren't restaurant people. And they would come and visit our restaurants, and they would want to see our real profit and loss statements, not the one that was in the franchise disclosure. They'd want to see what individual stores.
Right.
And they would look at a lot of our stores and go, well, we can make more money than that. Because we did full P&Ls on the restaurant level, all the way down to what a human being would make if they owned it.
Right.
And it was just crazy how quickly.
And what is that? What is that money? Is it does in your P&L, is the owner drawing a salary and then he also gets a part of the bottom line, whereas the owner draws no salary and all that's going to the bottom line is truly the income to the franchisee? That's the other thing you got to be careful of, because it depends on how you do your accounting.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so So when you shop franchises, those are the things you got to ask, because somebody's P&L may include, a certain amount of money for you and another one does not. And so if you start making those decisions without understanding that, you could find yourself in not such a great shape. You might have made a different decision.
You're so right. And I'll give you a couple examples that franchisees will do. If they're big enough, they'll take, like they'll have their own maintenance department. So we need equipment worked on. You don't have to call somebody outside the company. You can call your own maintenance man. But what they'll do is have the maintenance man charge as if they were an outside company. So you might be paying your own internal employee, $75 an hour or whatever. So that encourages the management of the restaurant to take better care of the equipment, do the little preventive maintenance kind of things they're supposed to do. But that would be another area of profit for the owner of the business, because the maintenance person's on a salary. But we're charging $75 an hour, and he ain't making $75 an hour. Another thing that a lot of folks don't realize is if you're a part of a national account like Coca-Cola USA, if you're a part of that, they give you rebates when you buy, so many bag-in-the-box sodas. And that goes straight to the franchise owner, but never shows up on the P&L of the restaurant. So the owner's got income that you'll never, ever see when you're looking at the books of an individual restaurant.
You're right.
You're right. There's a lot of
it's hard to get an apples to apples.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. It's getting an apples to apples comparison. I mean, and in theory, that's what the item 19 statement is supposed to do. It's supposed to level set so you can make a broad comparison. But in my experience, again, you can get pretty creative with accounting, right? So, maybe there's not a salary for the owner, but there's a management fee, right? And that management fee goes to the owner, and that's a percentage of revenue, right? So those are the things you kind of have to look at.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding all the information helpful in your food truck business, please consider becoming a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. If you guys need a business coach to help you reach your food truck's full potential, just check out all my affordable services. There's a link in the description for that as well. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Come back again tomorrow, because I've got plenty more to say when it comes to helping you and your food truck business.